Okay. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you have not been here before, my name is Emma. This might not be the best video to start off watching. Maybe it is. No. Yeah, it totally is actually. Over the past, week plus my entire life. But definitely this past week, there's been a lot going on around our nation regarding basic medical procedures for, those who identify as women and folks with uteruses. Hello, this is After the Fact Emma, thinking that at the beginning of this video, I really should put a content warning and a trigger warning for anyone who has clicked on this and may not be able to make assumptions about what this video will be about. I will be talking about rape, assault, incest, abuse, violence, abortion, and all of those things. And so if those things can trigger you or make you feel uncomfortable, this might not be the video for you. But I also, people who may be kind of on that borderline, I also challenge you to think critically about what is going on in our communities and still be able to use your voice and your experiences to help challenge the things that are going on. And maybe that's not necessarily watching my video, but helping to lift yourself up and try as hard as you can to overcome those things so that we can hear your voice and your very important stories and experiences. Thank you. I have had this video on my list to film for a really long time. I've always wanted to share my story because I think it is important. And I just finally had to sit down and actually do it because in May of 2019, it's even more fucking important. So I also did some research for this video. So if you see me looking down, that's because I literally have almost 5 pages of notes of stuff to talk about. Okay, where to start? So, most notably, what has been going on, Ohio and Alabama and now Missouri and Georgia, are a bunch of fucking old, mostly white and mostly men sitting down and telling other folks what they can and cannot do with their bodies. Specifically regarding the right to abort or keep a unwanted, unintended pregnancy. And I don't even have words anymore for how I'm feeling, because this has happened over and over and over again so many fucking times, but it feels different now because of just the state that our nation is in. The status that women and marginalized populations have in our society right now is fucking atrocious. So some people know, but all throughout high school I worked at Planned Parenthood. I was a part of a peer program that they had, and so I was given training every single summer. I went through 40 hours of training every summer on sexuality and health information surrounding reproductive rights, and then I would go teach other folks and my peers and that type of stuff. And, you know, I remember back then, I was in high school from 2007 until 2011, and I remember back then doing the same fucking fight. Like, our big thing back then, and again, I lived in Illinois, was, comprehensive sex education. So we wanted to get real sex ed in high schools, which we successfully passed. After I graduated, we actually successfully passed that bill that, public high schools in Illinois that teach any type of sex education are required to teach comprehensive sex education, and there was a list of different curriculums that they were allowed to use. But I remember fighting these things back then. And so some of the ones that I wrote down that are like a little more recent, more specific, there was another big attack in 2013 on reproductive rights. And so North Dakota and Arkansas both put into place measures about livelihood and gestational limitations, as well as attacks on the medical professionals who are performing medical procedures. However, again, these things have been declared unconstitutional because, per the U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court in our land, in 1973, Roe v. Wade was passed, and that said that all folks are legally able to have a legal and safe abortion as a constitutional right. And since 1973, fucking conservative assholes have been trying to take that away from us. And it happens every fucking year, over and over and over again. I also wrote down, from 2014 to 2018, 424 separate acts were put into place regarding women's and reproductive health. And in 2019 alone, so again, we're only in May, you know, it's almost June, so we're not even halfway through the year, and already 30 different pieces of legislation have passed. And this is nationwide, so what happens is, because Roe versus Wade is a constitutional, like, right for everyone now, that then they have to attack it on a state level. And so it's whether you live in Ohio, or you live in Alabama, or you live in Missouri, or you live in Georgia. And so for folks who live in blue areas, these things don't get passed in their state governments because there's people who are voting specific elected officials into office that value the same things that they value. And so the problem with these red states is that there's the people on the completely right side of the spectrum that are wanting to take away all bodily autonomy for any individual who is not straight, cis, white, blonde hair, blue eyes bullshit, and tell them that they are less of a human and take away basic human rights that they deserve. And there are people that feel so strongly about it in these very rural areas, that in these rural areas where people aren't receiving quality education and the resources to find out this information, and they're also not given the resources to actually then go vote, all of those voices are taken away, and we only hear these really, really loud voices on the right. And so these areas are just so cruel to anyone of any marginalized population, or anyone who's anything other than straight and white. So I'm gonna start with, let's start with Alabama. So they have made it a felony for any doctor to perform an abortion at any stage in the pregnancy. So under the current federal standard, with Roe versus Wade, you can have a safe and legal medical abortion any time in your first trimester. This was voted on a 25-6 vote of approval. So again, where I'm talking about the people who are educated and have access to vote and what they're voting for, and then what those elected officials are standing for in these areas. So 25 out of the 31 who voted all voted in support of this in Alabama. And so then we have to think about the people who are putting those officials in office. And just as another side note, in Alabama, there's only 3 clinics left who even perform abortions. And Alabama is not the smallest state. I mean, it's by no means huge. It's no Texas, but there's only 3 left. And so if all 3 of those are concentrated in the larger cities, again, folks that don't have access to education and contraception and the knowledge about your menstrual cycle and ovulation and those things, don't have access to contraception to prevent a pregnancy from happening, then they also, even if abortions weren't illegal, they didn't have access to get to a clinic either to have an abortion, and now they can't have abortions. And so it just doesn't make any sense. And you're also not going to give them any support and funding for when they do have to carry these unwanted babies to term. And you're not supporting foster care and people who are in the adoption industry. It's an industry. It's all about making money. They don't fucking care about these kids whatsoever. Anyone who's in the foster care system can tell you that. They do not care. And in terms of education, Alabama ranks 50th in the entire U.S. So, like, should we really be trusting people in Alabama with these types of decisions? What do any of them know about medicine and care for anybody? None of them are doctors. Like, why do they get to make these decisions about medicine? What also is really fucked up is the governor of Alabama is a woman, and there's this lovely photo plastered all across the internet of her signing this bill. And it honestly just, I want to, like, rip out my heart when I see this photo. So, the same day that she signed this bill, Missouri introduced a ban on abortion at 8 weeks. There are exclusions for medical emergencies, but there are none for rape or incest and sexual assault and violence in any way. Currently, they already have a 72-hour mandatory waiting period to receive an abortion. So if I lived in Missouri and I went to a clinic and said, hi, I need to have an abortion, I don't want this pregnancy, they say, okay, here's all the facts, come back in 72 hours. I already took this day off work. I already drove all the way here, and now you're gonna make me wait and come back in 3 fucking days? No one has time for that. I need it done now. I don't want this pregnancy. And so, Missouri also, if the current bill, which is no abortions after 8 weeks pregnant, if that does not pass, they have a backup bill that has different gestational time limits of anywhere from 14 to 20 weeks. So basically they know that this is fucking absurd, and they're like, well, I guess we need a plan B for when plan A doesn't work. Yeah. Okay, let's move to Ohio, which Ohio is something that's commonly known as a heartbeat bill. And so that is if the medical professional can determine a heartbeat from the embryo, then an abortion cannot be facilitated. And so heartbeats are found a couple different ways in embryos. They can do an abdominal ultrasound, so that's when they squirt it on your belly and take the little thing over. Or, you know, oftentimes at earlier stages of a gestational period, they'll go in vaginally, and so it's like this giant fucking probe thing that like rubs up against your cervix, and is pretty uncomfortable. And that is how they would find the heartbeat. Because, it can be determined as early as 6 weeks. And at 6 weeks, an embryo has not even developed a heart. Like, the actual heart organ that beats in my chest is not even fucking developed yet. It's literally just this flap inside the clump of cells that is pumping blood while the cells are growing and multiplying, and that is what they're calling a heartbeat. So it's honestly fucking ridiculous. So also in Ohio with this heartbeat bill, there are no exceptions for rape and incest. Previously, Ohio had a 20-week ban on abortions, and a lot with the 20-week mark is a lot of crazy people, you know, who read things on the internet and think that they're edgy. They think that at 20 weeks the fetus can feel, and so, oh my gosh, we can't murder it, it can feel it. Okay, well, let's think about the baby cows and the adult cows that you kill every fucking single day just so that you can put them on your dinner plate. It's another story. Also, in Ohio, minors have to obtain consent to receive an abortion. So, I saved the most fucked up for last. And that's fucking Georgia. Again, it's a heartbeat bill. So they're trying to ban termination of pregnancy. The earliest that you could hear a heartbeat, again, it's that flap of cells pumping blood through other cells to help them grow. So they have also put a bill in place that those who perform abortions will receive 10 years in prison. And so what's really fucked up about the wording of it is it literally words it as those who perform abortions. So there's nothing explicit in it about women who self-induce, you know, out of desperation because, you know, now they can't go get an abortion, as well as pregnancies that are wanted and are loved and miscarry. And so a woman who is so excited about being a mother and has a soul-crushing miscarriage could now be sentenced to 10 years in prison because their pregnancy was terminated. It wasn't done by someone else. Their own body did it. And that's the problem with the wording of this bill, is it doesn't make those things explicit. The other problem with this is that miscarriages happen more frequently in marginalized populations, and specifically women of color, because they don't receive as high of medical care because of the fucking prejudices and discrimination that still continue to exist in 2019, but racism is dead. And so again, it's putting people in prison for 10 years for a miscarriage when Brock Turner, who was caught raping an unconscious woman, served 3 months in prison. Yeah. Yeah. That's fucked up. Like, Georgia, I don't know what the fuck y'all are on. So I also want to talk a little bit about, like, you know, I touched on what Roe versus Wade is. Again, it's our constitutional right to a safe and legal abortion for any unwanted pregnancy. Before Roe versus Wade was passed in 1973, there's a statistic here from 1965, so 8 years prior, that illegal abortions accounted for 1 in 6 of all pregnancy-related deaths. So women would literally rather kill themselves than go through with an unwanted pregnancy. And so what all of these fucking states in the fucking 21st century, what all of these legislators are telling me is that they would literally rather me fucking kill myself because I don't want to go through with a pregnancy than fucking allow me the right to choose what medical decisions I make about my own body. That's fucked up. Like, I didn't want to cry. So, since 1973, there have been some successful restrictions to Roe. The first being the Hyde Amendment in 1967, which blocks Medicaid from being used for abortions. And so this is really, really detrimental to, again, marginalized populations, poor women, because abortions are expensive. It's not as expensive as carrying a pregnancy to full term and raising a child, but abortions are expensive. It's still a medical procedure. We still have to pay medical professionals for their time and the resources that they use to provide us with this service. And so when the Hyde Amendment was passed and it says that we can't use Medicaid or basically federal funding, it's a huge blow to marginalized populations and poor women everywhere who don't always have, the stash pile of funds when an unwanted pregnancy can happen. Again, another one that I talked about was in 2007 was when the Supreme Court upheld the ban criminalizing abortion in the second and third trimester. And so that's, later stage pregnancies, they're saying, no, you already had, a whole trimester to decide. Like, you don't get to make that decision about your body anymore. Now we made it for you. So that sucks. And I've already talked a lot about a lot of the ongoing things that keep getting introduced, but just again, a really quick overview is restricting insurance coverage, what's known as TRAP laws, and that stands for Targeted Restrictions on Abortion Providers. And so these are different laws and bills that are put into place to not target the women, but they're targeting the providers, and like a lot of times really specifically the physical clinics. And so they're wanting these clinics to be ambulatory facilities, which means that the hallways have to be a certain width for gurneys and other medical equipment. They have to, like, they want the doctors who are, medical professionals who are performing the procedures to have hospital privileges, and just things that are not necessary for a very safe outpatient procedure that I go to the clinic, they administer me the medication, I sit for about an hour, and they give me all of the instructions of what to do when I go home. So then again, specific gestational ban, so that's putting those like week markers on it. Some states have mandatory ultrasounds, and so when you go in for a procedure, they will do an ultrasound on you because they need to see how far along you are to know what's going on in your body. You want your medical provider to understand as much as possible what's going on with your body. However, some of them make the women or the person who is pregnant look at the ultrasound as well as hear the heartbeat. I've talked about the mandatory waiting periods. Most oftentimes it's that 72-hour waiting period, as well as the consent for minors. And then again, these like personhood bills, which are literally calling a clump of cells attached to my body a life. So this is what your friends who are able to get pregnant have been dealing with for the past week. And probably when I get this video up, it'll have been last week. It'll take me a little time to like edit out all my madness. But this is what has been going on in our country in 2019. And like I mentioned, I have wanted to talk about my story and my experience for a while now. I started my channel summer of 2017, so this is summer 2019, so 2 years ago. I've been so infrequent, but this has been on my list of something to make. I've always wanted to sit down in front of a camera and share my story. And again, I feel like now it's even more important. Because the reason that we fight for this is to give women and those who are pregnant the choice and the autonomy about their own fucking bodies. This isn't about politicians sitting in a courtroom hundreds of miles away from a fucking clinic. This is about the women and those who are pregnant in the clinics with their doctors, with their partners sometimes, with their families sometimes, and deciding what is the fucking best option for them. And in June of 2016, when I fucking found out I was pregnant, I was afforded the right to make the choice. And now in 2019, there are millions of women who are not given that choice anymore. And I feel even more I felt even more inclined to make this video and share my experience. Because I want to show those women, and I want to show everyone who no longer feels like they have that choice anymore, that I am here for you, and I will do everything I can to keep fighting for you. And it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, and it doesn't matter why you want to terminate a pregnancy. If it's an unwanted pregnancy, then you should not have to go through with it. And I've been struggling a lot that I've seen a lot of people sharing their stories about why they had an abortion, and I feel like people feel the need to justify it. I was in an abusive relationship and I got pregnant. If if I would have gone through the pregnancy, he might have killed me, etc. All of these things. You know, someone who was raped, and again, they don't want to be reminded of that trauma. And those are all 110% valid reasons. Like, I'm not discrediting people who have been through those experiences. And I'm so sorry that there are people in this world who had to go through those experiences. And I recognize that my experience comes from such a place of privilege. I am a educated, white, straight, cis woman who was sort of financially able at the time to scrape together the money and figure it out. But I was not in an abusive relationship. I was in a loving and caring relationship with my partner, who I am still in a loving and caring relationship with today. I was not raped. I was, I wasn't worried what would happen to me if I did go through with the pregnancy. Other than that is not the life that I wanted for myself as a 22-year-old who was, I guess I was 23. A 23-year-old who was getting ready to start a graduate program, that I had no money, that I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I just didn't want that. I am not that excited about motherhood other than my cat. And that's not what I want for myself. And I have the right to make that decision for myself. Yes, I value my partner's opinion, but this decision is still mine. And I was able to make that decision. I was able to terminate a pregnancy that I did not want. And that's it. That's all there is to it. There's no reasons for legislators sitting hundreds of miles away to make a decision about the decision between myself, my partner, and my medical provider. And I don't want a child. I didn't want a child. I still don't want a child. And that is the only decision that matters, is the person who is pregnant and what they want out of their life. It's not my job to overpopulate this world. It is not my job to be a fucking incubator. That's not what I was put on this earth to do. And the fact that some people fucking think that I am a walking incubator, because the second that a clump of cells start to come together, that's a life. No! If you cannot take it out of my body and it is not fucking living off of me anymore, it's not a fucking life. And if you want all of these women to have so many unwanted pregnancies, what are you doing about the kids in foster care who already don't have homes? Are you going to take it upon yourselves to foster kids, to adopt kids, to provide money for the foster care system so that it's not so overcrowded and that these kids aren't living in such horrible conditions most of the time? Are you going to take it upon yourself to provide underserved communities and mothers with childcare and fucking nutrition that they need? People that can't even fucking feed their children breakfast before school? It just doesn't make any sense. If you want to take away the medical rights of folks who everyone deserves them, if you want to take those things away, you have to give it back somewhere else. And they're not. They're taking those things away too. They're cutting back every single fucking social service in this country. Sorry, boy. Look at that beautiful man. He's a good boy. Okay. So I had to take a short break to collect myself. I was trying not to cry, but I mean, I'm a sobbing mess all the time, so it's fine. So I just really wanted to make a video to share my story and to say to women and folks everywhere who have the ability to get pregnant that I stand with you and I will not stop fighting for you. And we will defeat this. We will not let anyone take away Roe from us. And your life and the decisions that you make with it are more valuable than a clump of cells. So, thank you to everyone who listened to my story and my rants. For everybody else who is angry and frustrated and heartbroken right now, thank you. To other folks I know who are sharing themselves online, thank you. To other folks who are sharing themselves within their circles and people around them, thank you. And that's really all we can do right now is fight and support each other. Yeah. Have a good day, everyone. I also wanted to say one more quick thing, because something that I didn't mention, I didn't make a note of it and I really should have, is that this is a medical procedure that should be available to anyone who has the ability to get pregnant. And so that also means trans folks. And specifically within trans and gender nonconforming and queer communities, the violence that occurs against those populations can escalate to the violence of raping individuals and sexual assault against those with differing gender identities, and which can lead to an unwanted pregnancy. And so for trans and gender nonconforming folks and genderqueer folks who are already discredited so many times in their own gender identities and expressions, to then, trying so hard to identify and present themselves in whatever way, it can be even more detrimental to, of course, violence and being assaulted is just, I who don't know what I'm trying to say, but it doesn't just affect women, is really what I'm trying to say. And so when we talk about these issues, I see this issue from a straight, white, cis, heterosexual, privileged white woman's perspective, and I think about it because of my story. But I have to think about the other communities that are affected and the ways in which it would affect people across the intersections of identities. And it's not just a women's issue when we think about biology. It really is about all people, and it is about marginalized communities and the ways in which we continually try to control them. And I just really wanted to make sure that I put that out there, because I see you and you're valued and your voices are heard. Maybe not by the people that are making the decisions, but there are people like me who see you and hear you.